Now, the UN is warning of a perfect storm of instability in Mozambique, where a humanitarian crisis is going largely underreported. More than 500,000 people in the country have been forced to flee their homes, the victims of escalating extremist violence, disease and government failure. The conflict with Islamist militants has been going on since 2017, but has recently ramped up. Well, let's get more on this now. Joining me is the Head of External Communication and Advocacy at UNICEF Mozambique. That is Daniel Timme. Very warm welcome to you. You've been on the ground in the worst affected area in Mozambique. Just tell us what you've seen and what it's like there.
Yeah, unfortunately, the children in Mozambique have at the moment to deal with several humanitarian crises at the same time. Only 2 weeks ago, we had a major cyclone in central Mozambique, which has affected more than 400,000 people. Half of them are children. And indeed, we have heard it in the introduction, in the north of the country, more than 500,000 people are displaced. And at the moment, they are living in quite miserable conditions. I've been there recently. Many are in host families, but there's a large number of people who live in improvised accommodation centers. And our main concern at the moment is the outbreak of diseases, in particular the cholera. The people there live in very crowded conditions. The rainy season is setting in. It's very hot and humid. It's the perfect breeding ground for waterborne diseases, and we urgently need to scale up the water and sanitation situation there.
Gosh, it sounds absolutely dire. Massively underreported this. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is happening on the background of a global pandemic. Of course, we can understand that in the industrialized world, the focus is very much on this. But at the same time, we urge everybody not to forget that the life of hundreds of thousands of people and children in Mozambique are currently at risk. And we, on top of all, have also to deal with this pandemic, which doesn't make our humanitarian work easier. And also we have to see that we as humanitarians don't bring these diseases to the people we are here to serve.
And as well, with all of these kinds of crises, you have the immediate pressures, as you described, the need for clean water, sanitation and the problems of diseases like cholera. But presumably, where there are children anyway, there are some longer-term issues, things like how on earth you provide schooling and education so that you don't have a generation of children that are growing up without any opportunities.
Well, at the same time as Europe or other countries, we are facing the pandemic and school closure for almost a year here now. But obviously for these displaced children, it's even harder. There's no way that they can continue remote learning. What we are trying to do is to establish child-friendly spaces where children can at least be animated and have a place where they can play and sing, and where we also can monitor the situation and detect problems, for example, health problems like malnutrition, which is on the rise, but also psychological problems, because many of these children have seen terrible atrocities and need psychosocial support.
Absolutely. Look, we've talked about the pandemic in terms of it distracting the international community, but how is the pandemic affecting Mozambique itself? And what is the situation in the country's hospitals? Is it able to cope with the combined horror of this cyclone along with the political unrest in the north?
The numbers are also on the rise here in Mozambique. Luckily, the population structure is much younger than in Europe, and so the total number of COVID-19 deaths is not nearly as high as in European countries, but it's a serious situation, and the health system needs to be strengthened. That's something we work on with partners at the same time. as we are also responding to the cyclone disasters in central Mozambique and to this conflict and displacement of more than 500,000 people. UNICEF and the aid community and the government of Mozambique have to face a major stretch, and we will need more funding to properly respond to the needs of these children and people here in Mozambique.
OK, Daniel, Timme, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us from UNICEF. All the best.
Thank you for having me.